Good evening. I'm coming before you tonight because I think it's time that we address what's going on in the world from a different perspective. And tonight, we're going to be talking about coping. I've seen so many things on social media, on the news, so many stories about life happening to people and people falling into what we know it has to be depression because we are seeing now that suicide is on the rise. Suicide is taking over families from everywhere. People are dealing with it, people are struggling with it, and it's time for us to address it. So tonight I'm coming before you not with my normal message that speaks from a spiritual perspective, but tonight I'm going to be talking to you from a practical perspective because it's time for us to address things that's going on in the world. It is time for us to help people help themselves. And I come before you letting you know that each of us could be one life circumstance from a struggle. Each of us could be dealing with it in our own way because you don't know that you are at that point until you're at that point. That's the very unfortunate thing. Most people don't know they're at the breaking point until they've reached that point. So each of us could be at that very place in our lives. But tonight we're going to talk about it from a practical perspective. And if you followed me before and you're my friend on Facebook, you know that I truly believe in the power of God. I know that He can heal, deliver, and set us free. But on tonight, I want to speak to those of you who know God. You know Him in the pardon of your sin, but you struggle with depression. I want to speak to those that don't know Him, that have never tried Him, that are dealing with depression. I want to deal with those who are struggling to cope with everything that's going on in the world. There are people that are actually living in fear right now because of crime and hatred and COVID. I want to speak to those people who may be falling into depression because you don't know what's going on in life. You don't know what the next move is going to be. I want to speak to those who are struggling with grief. And no matter what that looks like, grief is not always attached to death. Grief can be attached to so many different things. I want to speak to you tonight. And lastly, I want to speak to those people who are just sick and tired of being sick and tired. Whatever that looks like for you, I want to speak to you tonight. I posted a message earlier making myself available to those in a struggle. But God spoke to me and said that everyone's not going to reach out for the assistance, so you have to teach it. I'm teaching it from a place hoping that it will bring deliverance to someone that may hear this message. And if this message can help someone change their mind, see life differently, then I know that God is pleased. But before I begin, I want to just give this disclaimer. When people look at pastors and ministers and bishops and those of us who profess the Word of God, sometimes they believe that our lives are perfect, that we've lived these perfect lives. And that is far from the truth. When you see us standing before you, you see forgiveness. You see people who have been tried, people who have done wrong but have been forgiven. You see people who are operating in God's grace. You see people that have struggled, but we've gotten to a point in our lives where we have decided that we were going to make Jesus our choice. What you see before you when you see people who profess the Word of God, you see those of us that are like a puzzle. We are like the puzzle. When you see the puzzle pieces, they're all broken apart. But after careful placement of those pieces, after someone takes the time to put those pieces together, you see the beauty of the image. And we all know when you see that beautiful image, most of the time, you fail to see all the lines that remain that show you that there were once pieces. So when you look at us that stand before you to teach the word of God, we are like that puzzle that God had to put us together after the pieces were all around. So don't think that we're perfect and we're speaking to you from a place of condemnation. Don't think that we are far removed from any of life's circumstances, because before we can get to the place where God will use us greatly in the kingdom, most of us have been broken. Most of us has been broken because God has to get us to a place where he can remove judgment. We can't point the fingers at other people because we have some testimonies. We have some things that we've been delivered from. So on tonight, I sit before you walking in deliverance because I've been forgiven of some things. I've had to endure some things, but it's all about choosing for me to make Jesus my choice. If you have not gotten to that place in life, it's a personal decision. But on tonight, this is not going to be a spiritual lesson. This is a practical lesson because I want you to understand that you have a decision that you can make right now that can change the trajectory of your life. You can make a decision that can change the outcome of your life. So if it's you and you're in a struggle right now, maybe you haven't gotten to the point of suicide or depression, but you're in a struggle. This message is for you on tonight. Because remember, no one knows they're to that point until they're there. So I want to help change your mindset right now. So tomorrow, when you wake up, you will be able to see life differently for yourself. If I can make a difference tonight and change your tomorrow, then God gets the glory. And hopefully things will be okay in your life moving forward. There are resources. There are people available to you. But you just have to take the first step to get to where they are. So as we go through this lesson, as I stated to you, I come to you because there's so much going on in the world. There's crime, there's fear, there's hatred, disrespect, rapid drug use, and now we're hearing about suicide. People have decided that they have no way out. Their only means of freeing themselves from the pain is self-inflicted harm. So tonight, let's talk about it. Let's come together so that we can try to make a difference in someone's life that might be listening to this. I want to show you that tonight there is a difference between sadness and depression. While they are linked, there is a difference between the two. Sadness is a situation. It's based on a circumstance. Sadness will come and sadness will go. There will be multiple periods in our lives where we experience sadness. But depression is a mental disorder. Depression comes into one's life and disrupts daily living. So you can be sad and you can have a sad moment, but you can still go on with your life. When you fall into depression, it disrupts daily living. You don't want to do certain things that you used to enjoy. Getting out of bed becomes a struggle. Putting on your clothes becomes a struggle. Looking at yourself with joy becomes a struggle when you fall into depression. Your body aches. There's pain in your heart. Your mind is running. Depression has a way of impacting the whole body. There's a difference between sadness and depression. But I want you to understand that no matter where you are, if you desire change, you have to do the work. You will have to fight for yourself in the midst of the struggle. You will have to fight your way through it in order to get to a place where healing can actually take place. Depression is real, people. And depression does not have a sad face all the time. It does not mean that a person walks around all the time looking sad and downtrodden. There are people who are living in depression with smiles on their faces when they're in the public, and they go home and they struggle in silence. Depression does not have a sad face. Depression does not have a social economic status. Depression doesn't live in a certain house, drive a certain car, wear a certain wardrobe. Depression doesn't have a certain look. Depression lives in the heart and the mind of the individual. It is a personal imbalance. It is a struggle to accept the reality. And there are times when that reality is contrary to evidence, but is real to that person. How many of us say that we see a person and we think they had it all together, and we found out later how depressed they were, even while they looked as if they were functioning? Depression does not have a look. It's a feeling. It's an imbalance on the inside. So tonight, we want to change the mind. We want to change the mind of someone that may see this message in hopes that we can stop one person from struggling with this alone. Depression resides in the parts that we don't see. It's not written on someone's face. It doesn't show up every day. And sometimes they may look like they have a good day, and then the next day is different for them. How will we know? Because it's a personal struggle. So tonight, let's change the mindset. Sometimes depression, just so that we can see what it really looks like, it's the one that makes all the jokes. The one that shows up with all the jokes all the time. Really, that person is making other people laugh to take the pressure off them. Sometimes depression lives in the mind of the jokester. Depression can also be the one who presents his or herself very strong and powerful in a public setting. In the workplace, this is the one that has the most power, appears to have the most power. But then they go home and they struggle to have control over their own life. So they take that control, and when they're out, they use it. And they're running things, and then they go home and they crumble because they don't have the control that they need over their own emotions. Sometimes depression looks like that. Sometimes depression can be that person who is the constant giver, the one who's always giving to everyone. And at that time, the giving is their way of feeling some self-worth. They give to others. But sadly, some of these people go home and they struggle because they feel like no one ever gives to them. They do it in a manner where it's excessive, given to everybody. And then they struggle to feel like no one's ever there for me. And people think that they're okay because they're the perfect person. They help everyone. They're always doing for others. But then they're struggling. That's what depression can look like sometimes. We have read about Sigmund Freud. He deals with psychology. And Sigmund Freud teaches us that those things that I just mentioned to you, those are actually defense mechanisms. People will use defense mechanisms as responses to anxiety. It's how the conscious and the unconscious methods of how they handle the stress in social settings. People will use these defense mechanisms because it wards off people thinking anything is going on with them. They're defending their emotions. They're defending their reality. That's sometimes what we see when we see people in the public using these defense mechanisms while they go home and struggle alone. But I want you to understand how this looks as we navigate through life. See, as we go through life, we will all experience traumatic incidents. And trauma happens for us at different levels and different stages. When you're dealing with trauma, it depends on where you are in life. Just to give you some examples, just imagine a child, a toddler. If you have a toddler and you tell them no, do you remember how it just seems so traumatic for them to be told no? That was trauma at the toddler level. Then we get to the youth level, and there's trauma. Trauma at that level can be simple things. Not being allowed to go to a dance. Not having the latest fashions. Not being able to do what their friends do. Distorted body images in the youth. All that could bring trauma, but that's trauma at that level. Then you get to adults, and the adults have trauma. Adult trauma can look like lack of resources, not being able to pay your bills. Adult trauma could be grief, it could be sorrow, it can be broken relationships. All of that can bring adult trauma. And every situation that I mentioned to you at its given level could bring some depression if it's not handled properly. The toddler could struggle with being told no to the point where they live their lives thinking that everything is going to be a no. They can't appreciate the yes. The youth that I talked about with the distorted body image, the youth that didn't get the latest and greatest fashions can live in depression because they feel like they're not worthy. They don't love themselves. I'm not good enough. All of that can start right there. Trauma that never gets processed properly that could lead into depression. An adult that's struggling with lack of resources, if there's never an opportunity to deal with that, that could lead to depression, unmatched, unhandled depression, and that person struggles in a deep pit all by themselves. And while we think they may be doing okay, it could be that very thing that just triggers more and more trauma in their life because it's unprocessed. Well, tonight, I hope that this message will help someone understand that you're not alone. Many of us have had to struggle and endure things, but as we go through life, we change our perspective on things. We change how we view it. And I'll have things that I'll tell you tonight in hopes that it will help you if you are in that place where you feel as if you're in a struggle and you don't know how to come out of it. Tonight we're coming together to talk about it, to show you that there is a better way. There is hope for you. You just have to recognize it. You have to deal with it, and you have to do the work to come out of it. First, I would like to tell you that you have to identify things that are triggers. Even if you have unprocessed trauma, there could be triggers. Things that trigger you, things that make you go off, things that remind you of situations and circumstances that brought you harm and trauma and grief. If you identify those triggers, those are the things that you need to avoid at all costs if necessary, because you will have to fight constantly for your mental health. You will have to fight for it. So when you're fighting for your mental health, you have to remove yourself from the triggers. And sadly, triggers can be people. There are certain people that can trigger the worst in you, especially when you're in a place where you're dealing with something. It can be the very thing that a person says that makes you go off that day. And then you struggle with it because today is not the day. I have something that I'm dealing with and you have become my trigger. So you have to identify those things that are triggers. Suicide. We've been hearing a lot about this now. Suicide is actually the result of failed defense mechanisms. When people fail to realize how they defend themselves against what's going on in life, that's how we get to the point of suicide. Suicide is even evident with people who don't have the proper coping mechanisms. They're not able to cope with everyday life. They're not able to cope with what's going on around them. That's how they get to the point where I feel like I'll be better off if I'm not here. The pain is too deep. I can't cope. I can't defend myself. So this is what I feel I need to do. Tonight, people, we must understand all we have to do is begin to change how we see ourselves and see the situation in hopes that will make a difference between someone choosing life or feeling like I have no other choice. That's what we're talking about tonight. So tonight, I'm going to go through some things to help you learn to fight for yourself. Every day, you have to fight for yourself when you're struggling with mental imbalance. Every day, you will have to fight to make sure that you can be your best self when you're in a struggle. No matter what that struggle looks like, it's real to you. Your feelings, your emotions, they are real to you. So no one can discredit how you feel. If it's real to you, it's your reality. But tonight, I want to tell you to fight for yourself. First, I'll start off by saying to ward off depression. If you are taking any prescription medications, consult with your physician to identify if depression is a side effect. There are many medications where depression and mood swings is a side effect of that medication. Consult with your physician if you're taking medications, especially if you're taking multiple medications, because sometimes the medications fight against each other in your body, and how the medicine reacts to your body could be different from what its intended purpose. So if you're on medication, let's start there. Consult with your physician. I want you, the next point, think about who you were before the trauma, before the situation, before the person came into your life, before the loss. Think about who you were before that. And I want you to take the time to write down words of affirmation and speak to that person you used to be. Speak to that person, because that person still lives in there. It's just that so much has come and has pushed that person down. It's time to pull that person back up to the forefront. It's time to fight for that person to reclaim his or her spot in your life. That person's still there. So go back to your happy place. Start there. Wherever that place was for you, go there. Even if it was a vacation spot, even if it was a job, even if it was a home or a community, go back there and speak to the person you were at that time. Find that place. Next thing, as I said to you earlier, identify the triggers and avoid them whenever it's possible. Right now, we're fighting. We're fighting together for you and your mental state. Identify those triggers. You may have to walk away from some people because they are your triggers. And so you will know there are some foods that can be your triggers. Read up on the foods that you take. If you have some days where your mood is worse than others, write down what you've eaten and see how those foods affect your body. Because some foods can help bring about depression. They can bring about mood swings, the way your body breaks those foods down. So write down what you're eating to see if that's having an impact on your mood and your minds. Remember, we're fighting for your mental health. You will also need to develop a healthy support system. A support system might not always be your family. It might not be your friends. It can't be the friends who are in the same state as you are that are bringing you down. It can't be your friends that are always pulling on you to help solve their problems. It needs to be someone that can speak life into you. Not a perfect person, but someone that's in tune to you, that can speak life to you. Someone can identify your struggles even if you don't express it. Get someone that can be your accountability partner. Someone who can look at you and say, I can see things are not all right with you. Someone you trust. Someone you can talk to. You need a healthy support system. Not someone that you run all your business down to. Because in order to help you, people don't have to know all your business. It may not even be the person you speak to on a regular basis, but it's that one person that you can go to, that you can be accountable to, that you can express your heart. You don't have to always express your business, but you need to be able to express your heart. Someone who you can be true to and someone who can be true to you. They may not always agree with you. They may not always make you feel good at the moment, but the words are true because you trust that they love you. Next thing, professional counseling is not a bad thing. If you are in a place where you're struggling in your mind, you may need to seek professional counseling. You may need to go to a counselor, someone that you can sit before that's a stranger, that will not know you from the neighborhood, someone who will not attend your church, someone you will not have to be around on a regular basis. That's how you maintain healthy professional boundaries. It would have to be someone that you can speak to that can help you through your situation. So if you're struggling, don't ward out professional counseling because it's not a bad thing. It does not mean you're weak. It does not mean you're crazy, as some people like to feel. Seeking help is actually a strength. If you get to the point where you feel like I'm struggling and I need someone, that's a strength because you're fighting for yourself. Next thing I need you to understand is you need to reduce stressors. Even if it's small, I don't care how minute it might seem. In order to fight for your mental health, you will have to reduce stressors. Simple things. You're looking for a pair of shoes in your closet. You start to become anxious. Anxiety is rising because you can't find them. Put on another pair of shoes and walk out boldly. Simple things. You wanted something red. You wanted something red, but all you see is something blue. Blue is not the end of it. Put on the blue and walk out boldly. You will have to start with small things to eliminate the stressors in your life. Anytime you get to the point where things started bothering you and you can't find peace, it's a stressor that needs to be eliminated. In order to fight for your mental health, you have to learn to remove the stressors, no matter what it looks like. Fight for yourself. Remove the stressors. Next, you must set your own standards for your life and live according to them. Do not live in the shadows of others. You don't know what it took for them to get there. You don't know all they had to endure, and it might not be for you. So don't live in the shadows of others. Many people fall into depression because they fail to live up to other people's standards. We see them outperforming and it looks as if they're doing great things, but they're struggling because there's pressure trying to live up to those standards. As people of God, when we are called and anointed and appointed, we have to walk in virtue. We have to walk in a position where we can be an example to others. We can't live any kind of way. And for those that are struggling in their lifestyle, that's a stressor because they're trying to live up to the standards of others. We see that in the marketplace. We see that in jobs. When people want to be so perfect in what they do because people think they're perfect, when actually there's no perfect being. Living like that will cause stress in your life. Don't live in under the standards of others. Find your standard and perfect that. Work to be the best you can be at your level. Now I want you to understand that as you fight for yourself, don't let unhappy people consume you. There are sometimes people are fighting their own battles, and so many people are dumping on them and pulling from them, and they're struggling and they're dealing with health issues and they're dealing with their own concerns. But then you have relatives that's constantly pulling on you. They expect this from you and they expect that from them. And friends are pulling on you, and you become depleted because you're trying so hard to be the best you can for others. You cannot allow unhappy people to pull you down and consume you. You must figure out what is healthy help and when it's time to say, I'm sorry, I won't be able to do that today. I'm not going to be able to do it. Saying no to a person does not make you a bad person. Sometimes it's healthy for you to learn to say no, because you must fight for yourself. You must fight for yourself. Next point, limit the use of alcohol and caffeine. Alcohol, people use it as a coping mechanism. But if you know anything about alcohol, it in itself is a body depressant. It brings you down. That's why you see one that has consumed alcohol, that's not sober, that's in a drunken state, they look slower because that's the alcohol's effect on the body. So what you have to do is when you're fighting for yourself and you're struggling in a situation, that is not the time to consume large amounts of alcohol. It keeps you in the struggle, because once you come off the drunkenness, once that wear off, reality is still present. You have to learn to fight your way through it without the substance, so that way you can heal. And another thing, stay away from large amounts of caffeine. And this might seem harsh to my coffee drinkers, but if you are one that consumes coffee every day and you must have it, and you notice that you're nervous and you're jittery and you have anxiety and you can't function without it, it's time to start pulling away from it. Drink some water, do a cleansing. Because caffeine can bring about depression. We know that coffee is often used when people want to stay up all night. They want to be wired up. But when you consume large amounts of it, it can sometimes have a different effect on the body. So when you are in a depressed state and you're fighting for yourself, cut back on your caffeine. Give your body a break, because you must see how these things are affecting my body and ultimately affecting my mental health. Next, I want to tell you that if you are struggling with grief, please know that grief is a process. Grief has a start date, but no two people have the same end date with grief. Grief does not happen for us all at the same time. There's healthy grief and there's unhealthy grief. But grief is true. Grief is true. And when you're dealing with grief, you could possibly be in a struggle. But I want you to understand it's a process. There are stages. They have some stages that have been defined as the stages of grief, and they start out with denial. When you're dealing with grief, you can start off in denial. Then you move to the anger phase. Then you move to the bargaining phase. Then depression sets in. And then you get to acceptance, where you accept that this is actually happening. It has happened. I must go through it. So if you're dealing with grief, it's a process. Don't rush yourself through the grief process. But don't get to the point where you struggle and you stay in depression. Just keep getting up. Keep fighting for yourself. Keep being focused on other things. So that way you can get through these stages of grief. No one can tell you when it's going to end. We mostly can tell you when it started, because we can identify that event that happened. We can identify what occurred and let you know, okay, this is when it started. But getting to the end of it, getting to acceptance, that's a process. Don't be hard on yourself, but fight for yourself every day. Many of us have gone through a depressive stage when we had to deal with grief, because we were rocked to the core. Our hearts were broken. How am I going to live without my loved one? I can't imagine my life without this person. And as you go through life, you don't forget it, but you learn to process it differently. Getting to the acceptance phase, it may take longer for some people. Some people may embrace it sooner, but no one can tell you when it will end for you, when you will get there. So don't struggle in your mind when you're dealing with depression and dealing with grief. Don't struggle in your mind. Fight for yourself. And grief does not always mean that you've lost a loved one. There are people that grieve the loss of a marriage. People grieve the loss of resources. People grieve the loss of a job. People grieve moving from a familiar place to the unknown place. That could bring about grief and fear and change. So grief is not always attached to the loss of a loved one and death. But if that's you and you're in that place of unknown and fear and you don't know how to handle it, fight for yourself. What you must do, if you're at any of these places, as you begin to fight for yourself and make sure that you maintain a healthy mental state, you must first understand that we've all gone through some things. How we process it, how we perceive it, how we get through it, it depends on our mindset, how we view it. We have to work to get through it. But we need to come together so that we can help those that are struggling, because suicide is becoming more and more familiar. Many people are feeling like they don't have a way out. We're seeing younger people committing suicide because of bullying and social media, being embarrassed on social media, people recording fights, people recording people in compromising situations, just bringing about hurt and shame, and people feel like they can't recover from that. Hurt and shame will happen. It may not happen on the same level for everyone, and I can't say it's not their reality. But what I can say is we have to put our hearts and our minds on caring for each other, letting someone know that we're there for them. And we can't just always tell someone, oh, you need to pray about it, it's going to be all right. I do believe in the power of prayer, and I know what God can do. But what if a person can't utter the words in prayer? What if they've prayed and they don't see an immediate change? They don't see immediate results. They may feel like their prayers aren't being heard. They may feel like God's not listening. So we can't just always tell people, go pray about it. Someone tells you they're broken. Well, did you pray? I understand the power of prayer. But sometimes people just can't utter the words. Sometimes they've prayed and things just haven't shifted. So we can't always give them that. Sometimes we have to be the listening ear. Sometimes we have to let them know, I'm here for you. You can give it to me. I'm here to talk to. I'm here to listen. And there are some times When you let people express themselves, they can talk themselves out of it. All they need to do is start talking about it. And you can be a present help. You don't even have to say anything, just your presence. A nod. Letting them know I'm listening, I care. I'm giving you my time and my attention. That can make the difference. So that's what we have to do, people. We have to be attentive to each other so we can hopefully start to let our loved ones know, and people we don't even know who may need us, let them know that they're not alone. They don't have to struggle in silence. We have to work to make this world a better place, one day at a time, one individual at a time. When you develop these coping mechanisms that I talked about, sometimes they're conscious, sometimes they're unconscious. Sometimes people will come up with things and they don't even realize they're doing it, but it's helping them cope. Then there are some times where you have to make conscious efforts to do things. You have to take the time to develop those things that give you a mental recharge. Whatever that is for you. When life is happening, stop. Take a deep breath. Figure out what's your mental recharge. How do you feed the healthy you? That might means that you need to get back to the place where you do the things you enjoy. It might be a struggle because when you get to a depressed state, you don't feel like doing anything. You don't want to be around anyone. That's when you have to fight the hardest. That's when you have to be in that bed. And if you're in that bed crying and you're wallowing, cry a little while, and then you have to say, you know what? I'm getting out of this bed. You get up, you get yourself together, get the mental recharge. Sometimes the mental recharge can be music for some people. If you love jazz music, if you love R&B music, if you love hip-hop music, whatever that might be, you might need a mental recharge. Pull away from that reality and recharge. Dancing can be a mental recharge. There are a lot of people that love to dance. It's free. It gets the body flowing. It gets the heart regulated. It gets the mind going. You're dancing. You're singing the songs. That might be your mental recharge. It doesn't mean that you're not holy. It doesn't mean that you don't love God. But you have to get the mental recharge. You will have to fight for yourself when you're going through things in life. When you're going through trauma and depression and pain, fight for yourself. Sometimes it could be spending time with your pets or your children, just getting a hug or love. That could be your mental recharge. It doesn't mean you leave outside your home. What you need is already there. You just have to work it. Sometimes the mental recharge can be things like drawing, playing sports, exercising, finding that hobby, whatever that might be. Some people like sewing, some people like knitting, some people like fishing, some people like crabbing. Whatever that mental recharge is, become one with nature if that's what you need. Enjoy the beauty that God has given us. Enjoy the simple things. Some people mental recharge might be just taking a drive, listening to music, opening the windows, letting the wind blow through. Mental recharge. You must fight for yourself because we know depression doesn't have a look. We've seen too many people who we think are at the prime of their lives, who should have it all together, who can buy anything, do anything, go anywhere. And we think those things should make them happy. And then we find out that that person was struggling and was in a dark place. And then heartbreaking, we find out suicide was their choice. This message has hit my heart because I'm seeing too much of suicide. And while I know that this is real, it's still heartbreaking. So I came on here tonight to talk to you in hopes that I can make a difference in somebody's life. It is time for us people to find that place where we can get the mental recharge, whatever that looks like for you. You don't have to struggle alone, but you must first realize, where did it start? Who was I before I got there? And where I want to see myself go. Remember, every day, even if you're not in depression, as life is happening, fight for your mental health. It is necessary. We have to fight for our mental health all the time, because life is going to happen. You don't know you're to that point until you're there. You don't know that this is the thing you can't handle until you're there. We don't know what it looks like. It's not going to be written on a piece of paper. It's not going to be given on us. Tomorrow is the day. If that was the case, we'll prepare ourselves for it, and many of us wouldn't want to go there. But life happens. So to you, this message is to help you understand that there's hope for you. There's help for you. But you have to be willing to do the work. So be encouraged. I hope this message resonates in the hearts and the minds of someone. Hope it makes a difference. Fight for yourself. Depression is real. Sadness is real. And now suicide is becoming more real to us. While this is heartbreaking, it's our reality. But one person with a changed heart and a changed mind can make a decision that changes their tomorrow. So you be blessed. Keep fighting for yourself. And even if you're not at a place of sadness and depression, you must fight for your mental health. Sometimes you just have to say, okay. Sometimes you just have to say, no, thank you. Sometimes you just have to say, no, I'm not going to do that. Whatever that looks like for you, that's what you do. Be encouraged. Continue to fight for yourself. Let's make the difference in our own lives. None of us are perfect. We've all had to endure. But it's about a transformed mind that makes the difference. I love you, as I always say in my feeds. But I want you to understand that you can make the difference if you start doing the work. Fight for yourself. Develop positive coping skills. Use the defense mechanisms if they're healthy. Coping skills must be healthy. There's a difference. You be blessed. Go forth and let's shift this thing. One person at a time, one day at a time. If you need me, you can send me a DM. Let's fight together. Let's develop the plan to make the difference. Have a great night. Blessed days ahead. Tomorrow is a new day. Tomorrow is a different day to do it differently, to make sure that you're okay. I love you, and you be blessed. Bye-bye.